And live from Brussels, it's
ZN
ZN Live.
Live.
That's right, we're live here from ZN in Flagey, and we have Clare Carlisle joining us from Brussels. Claire is an experienced communicator with over 20 years experience in different companies, including UPS, including SEPI, and she is now the communication director at Animal Health Europe. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about communication, social media, but of course, one of the fascinating trends of the internet and communication is those amazing cats and dogs that people love. Now, what do you think makes people so fascinated by those cat videos, and why? What is happening there?
Thank you. Thank you for the invite, Phil and Laura. So I think everyone falls down a rabbit hole every now and again watching cat videos or dog videos. There's so many feeds today on social media, really just focusing on that. And I think it is just that it's a happy place to be, right? I mean, social media can be quite a negative space, but those videos that are shared about cats or dogs or even other animals, wildlife, for example, they're very positive, they're cute, they're fun, and they're something that people want to engage with in a very positive way. And we've seen some really interesting stories. We're following several hashtags of, people who are looking after an animal, sharing stories, sharing updates on what they're doing to look after that animal. And I think, it's just something that people feel that it brightens their day. It's sometimes a good way to start the day as well. I'm following one right now called Sophie from Romania. I don't know if you've ever heard about it. So it's an ex-BBC journalist who basically got a rescue dog from Romania just before Christmas. And this dog has gone viral. He's been interviewed in Australia and America about the care of this dog. And people just want to know, how she's doing, because she wouldn't come out from behind the sofa for about 6 weeks or something. And every now and then she still goes back behind the sofa. So I think it's just something that people want to know about and find, fun and engaging.
It's fascinating. I think it's important to notice that people are not just interested in horrible things on the internet, and they also like positive stories. Now, Leora and I both have an animal. Leora has a cat. I have a bunny, both called Cookie, coincidentally. And Cookie, my bunny, has an Instagram page, which I'll be sharing later. Over 100 followers. So, what about you? What pet do you have?
So I have a cat. He's called Dobby the house cat because we are all Potterheads in our family. So, and he's quite cheeky, so he's a little bit like Dobby for those who know Harry Potter. And he was adopted from a friend who basically had taken on a farm cat, and obviously that cat was pregnant, that they hadn't been spayed, and so we took him on, and he's just been a great part of the family ever since. The kids absolutely love him. When they come home from school from had a hard day, they're just directly like, oh, Dobby, and it's all the cuddles, and it's just, he's a very social cat. We're lucky to have a very social cat. So he really provides a lot of comfort for them and me too, after a hard day.
And I think, this is something that you've been communicating on as well, which is mental health and pets, and how important it is, how the impact that pets have on people's mental health being very important during COVID. And I think we've seen a lot of people adopting pets during COVID, and it's important that they, of course, stay with those pets. Hello, Gaia, who says happy Friday to everybody. And please, if you have a pet, you can also share which pet and what's the name of your animal. Now, there is, I think, a bit of a challenge with this, and of course, you're communicating around animal health. Now, because of these very cute animals, I think people are focused more on the sweet animals. So how do you communicate on animals that are maybe not so Instagrammable? And how do you use communication tools to get your message out and to engage?
Well, I personally think that all the other animals are also quite Instagrammable, but I will admit that we're not yet on Instagram as Animal Health Europe. We are considering going on Instagram for our Pet Power campaign, because as you say, of course, the pets are perhaps more engaging. But I know a lot of people, actually members of ours, who tweet about their chickens and their cows and their goats and everything, because, I mean, they're just as nice as all the other animals. But for us, the messaging differs slightly, I would say. We have to be a little bit more reactive when it comes to farm animals. So sharing messages, perhaps busting some myths sometimes, or showing that, there is a lot of care and thought put into, welfare and health of animals. And when it comes to pets, I would say, yes, they are also cute and shareable, but there is a serious message behind our messages there too, because as you said, a lot of people got a pet during lockdown, but we heard from a lot of charities that those pets were actually given back during lockdown as people realized that they didn't, have the means to take care of them. So we do advocate also for responsible pet ownership as well.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So, Leah, are you going to take Guy's advice and start an Instagram page for your cat?
I do think he would become a cat influencer, as she says, because my cat is the most adorable. He was nominated, of course, for a prize, and it's incredible that he didn't win because he is amazing and sweetest cat in the world. From an asylum, was already given up or left abandoned twice, is injured, but is I don't understand why, because he is the sweetest cat in the whole wide world and handsome as well. So we can make this whole episode about Cookie. I had a slightly different question, because you work for this amazing organization, Animal Health Europe, at the moment, but you worked at UPS before and big companies like that. What's the difference? How is it different? What do you maybe prefer? Can you tell us a little bit about that, Claire?
Yeah. So when I first came to Brussels, I started off with CEPI, so the Paper Association. And sort of after a few years, I thought maybe I do want to try the more corporate side of things, just to get a feel, because when you don't really know what it is you want to do, I think it's good to try out, new things and go in different directions. So I worked at UPS for about 6 years. And I must say, I really enjoyed it. It was very different because, of course, it's a massive corporation. I was in charge of employee communications, and I was communicating to 42,000 employees on a daily basis. So it was very, very different. I had a much bigger budget, I must say, as well, from the trade association world. So I could do a lot more. Plus, I had access to lots of great merchandise, which I could run, competitions to boost employee engagement and things like that. But in the end, I would say, in terms of work-life balance, I think the trade association life in communications is probably better. I don't know if it's because UPS is American and they have, obviously that work ethic of not having very many holidays and things like that. Did that translate badly through in Europe? But for me, I definitely prepared the trade association world.
And you also talked about, communication and the tools that you're using. We were discussing that just before we went live. Now, most communication departments are really questioning now how to move forward in 2023 and 2024 with which tools. Twitter has gone through a lot with Elon Musk taking over. A lot of advertisers have walked away. Now he's got a new CEO. We'll see if that works out. And there's been a lot of discussion in the bubble. John Worth has been posting about why he left Twitter. He's very active on Mastodon. What are your views on whether organizations should consider changing or staying with Twitter? Where are you and why?
So we had a conversation just before Christmas within our communications committee about this, because obviously, everyone was getting a bit worried what's going to happen to Twitter when Musk takes over. And in the end, obviously following quite a lot of the advice from these EU influencers such as John Worth, we did some research, and we concluded that we would stay on Twitter because it's still sort of the channel within the Brussels bubble, which is where our main audience is. Of course, the policymakers are all in the Brussels bubble, and many of them are on Twitter. So we thought, yes, we could make a holding page on Mastodon, but in the end decided not even to do that. So we would consider on Twitter, but we would no longer put any promotional spend behind any of our tweets or campaigns. So I think, everyone wants us to grow also on LinkedIn. That's a platform that's come up more and more. But I think to hit the policymakers, then Twitter is really the best space right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, we've come to the conclusion as well that, well, as communicators anyway, and as digital focused agency people, we look at all channels. So we've been experimenting with Mastodon. We've been really pushing LinkedIn a lot. So I think I would agree that Twitter is still where the conversation is. People have not left the platform. It's still a core, but I think the brand has been damaged, and I think people are concerned and they don't really know whether it's something that you can trust in the long term. I think the key is that people need to be prepared to change, because it's never a single channel. It's always a conversation in multiple spaces. So I believe that you should stay where the conversation is. And I don't think you can, it's not because you don't like the way Ryanair is run that you never take a flight on Ryanair. I mean, you might, have some issues, but it's still part of the infrastructure where you live, and you're not going to not read an article in a newspaper just because you don't agree with the newspaper. You could still see what different views are being expressed in different channels. Yeah. I think Mastodon is interesting, but not taking a significant place, although people like John Worth and Andrew Strelein have decent amounts of followers. I think the conversation is still very much on Twitter, but we've seen LinkedIn, people being much more active and much more qualitative about some of their content there. So we've been looking at that. And in fact, Leora has become a bit of a leading expert on LinkedIn, and she just came back from Istanbul, where she was doing a LinkedIn training. So what's your advice on LinkedIn, Leora?
My apologies. Yeah, definitely. LinkedIn is becoming more and more important and much more of a... I apologize.
Some water?
It feels water.
Share the microbes.
Thank you. Yes, let's keep sharing those viruses. Especially, it's much more of a thought leadership platform than it was before, when it was more of a platform where you said, hey, I love everyone at my old job, which is why I'm leaving, and I also love everyone at my new job. And now it's really a place where people are sharing ideas, are positioning themselves as a leader in their space, and I think it's becoming more and more interesting. So definitely also a place to hit those policymakers. Sorry, I think we can.
Yeah. So I would agree. We would normally meet, but we're in the same space.
I was wondering.
But no, I think that what I like also about LinkedIn is that you have longer, thought pieces than on Twitter. Which means I like to from time just articulating your thoughts on a topic, and then you see whether people engage. So it's something that you use for yourself. I think for associations, the challenge is the company accounts are still don't get the same visibility as the individual ones, as Lyra was pointing out in one of her recent posts. But I believe that it is growing in importance, and I think it should just be part of the mix.
So maybe because I got my breath back. So that's exactly the challenge, that you need individuals for this, like yourself, Claire. So you cannot just have the organizations do it, because we see that policymakers, journalists, other people at companies, your targets, they prefer to engage with individuals much more than they do with company accounts or organizational accounts. Of course, you need those as well. That's your baseline, your base content, but then you need those individuals to amplify that content. That's the training I gave in Istanbul to 160 professionals, to how do you then turn those individuals into ambassadors. Of course, it's a mix of their own personal content with content that helps the organization, and has to be something that they feel good with. So for a communicator as yourself, it's communication content combined with animal health content. And of course, you cannot force. It was very funny because yesterday someone said, my organization is forcing me to repost everything that they do. Can they make us do that? And I said, well, I don't think it's a good approach, and I don't think they can, or that they should, to be honest. And furthermore, on LinkedIn, the best thing that you can do as an employee is to comment on your on the post, rather than just to repost them. It doesn't really help. Right. And so, but then, and of course, to become a spokesperson, but you want to become a spokesperson because you truly love what you do. And when I hear you speak, Claire, it's clear that you believe in your organization, you believe in the mission, you love animals, and it's much more powerful than if someone would tell you, do this now, right?
Yeah.
Or others.
Yeah, I agree. I think with LinkedIn, for us, what we find is that we get a lot of engagement with so people who are working within our member companies, and that's really nice to see, because not many of them are actually active on Twitter, because as you know, in different countries, people use different social media channels. So for us, it's more about getting down to that membership base, and so they can see what we're doing at Animal Health Europe, because many people in companies, if they're not involved in any of our committees or working groups, they know that their company is a member of Animal Health Europe, but they probably don't know what it is, why we exist, what it is we're doing. And so LinkedIn has really helped us with that. And we get a lot of comments now on posts about events, or even just reports, or, even just a post giving some data on animal health, on use of animal health products and that kind of thing. So it's been really good for that more engaging with your own people. So kind of internal communications, if you wish.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I think this is my advice is always, all these channels, work differently. And so you just have to look at the optimal mix for you. And you should never be tied to all, to only one channel. Jesus made a comment actually about how pets are playing an important emotional role. We talked about, the engagement that was generated, and it's true. These are very, basically constitute they're part of our lives, and they bring about that emotion. How well are you using the emotional side in your judgment, in your communication? Because obviously we're talking about an association, so you're supposed to be about facts and serious. Are you able to play with emotions and that side of things?
Yeah, well, it's quite funny because as you said, I've been in comms business for many years now, and I can tell you that probably about 11 years ago, I was actually part of a risk-benefit analysis task force of going on social media. So we had this whole, looking into the risks, looking into the benefits. What would it mean? How would we have to engage? Did we have the resources? How would we work if we got trolled? And it was quite in-depth. And at the time, we actually decided not to go on Twitter. And about a month later, I was anyway just looking at what was going on in the Twitter space. And I saw some bodies putting out some information about antibiotic use in animals, which was factually incorrect. And I flagged it to my SecGen at the time. And he said, okay, create a Twitter account, go on, you've got to bust those myths. So it was really funny at the beginning. It was all about, we've got to go on and bust those myths, talk about the benefits of animal health products, talks about how they're used in reality. So not just, all of these myths that are perpetuated often on social media. But I think nowadays we do definitely engage with the emotional side of things. As I said, the Sophia from Romania hashtag has been great for engaging and sharing, very heartwarming stories about their progress. There's a guy in Thailand, Bali, that we follow, who's bringing dogs into his sanctuary, and all of those are things that we can share. But I think also us as employees, as staff in the Secretariat, we have shared dozens of photographs, videos when pets come to visit us at the office. So we have a pet-friendly office space, and that's always great. And certainly on, National Dog Day or National Cat Day, we're definitely tweeting out pictures of our own cats and dogs. So it's great just to be able to share as well, your personal things that are happening. And one thing I've noticed with our companies recently is they are also moving into being a little bit more personal, perhaps more on LinkedIn than on Twitter. But I did see a tweet recently from one company whose employees have been helping with the socializing aspect of training assistance dogs. So a bunch of employees got together to take in the pets for the socialization part, so before they go into actual, professional training. So that was really interesting too.
Okay. And what would be your advice to young communicators who are beginning their career or who are doing their internships right now? What should they learn? What should they do to be best equipped to face this new world of work?
Yeah. It's always very daunting, isn't it, when you're just starting out in communications? So I certainly refer to some of the older references, such as the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it's got some great tips. I think you can also get some great tips from some of the guys here in Brussels. One of the ones that I often go to is Tom Moylan, and I think he's one of the EU influencers. I really like his posts. They're very good. But what I find is on LinkedIn, a lot of my peers in communications are posting articles every now and then, and I'll read those. I think that's good to share tips online. And it's definitely one thing that I would recommend to young people, to engage with other communicators, to see what they're talking about, to see what they're reading, because that's always very helpful. I always say to people, please be kind, please be polite. Whenever you're asking for something, remember your please and thank yous, and keep learning as you go. I'm very lucky in that I was able to choose the profile of our junior communications manager whenever she was hired, and I really wanted an in-house designer, so that I didn't have to, always, I mean, no offense, always go to an agency just to ask for a Twitter card or something like that. So I think that was really useful to have someone young as well on our staff. So as you're young, share all your ideas, because those of us who are older, we love it. We love the energy that comes from young people. So don't be frightened to speak up. That's one of my main tips is, don't be frightened, and also learn from your mistakes. I've made mistakes over the years. Of course, I've had some bad ideas. I've had some great ideas, but don't be afraid to speak up. That's really a good tip for young people.
Fantastic. So, Leora, what are your recommendations for this week?
I felt like we missed the jingle.
We missed the jingle.
Oh,
let's do a jingle now.
Let's
do the jingle for the recommendations, and then we'll get to your recommendation.
I love that jingle.
What are your recommendations for this week?
We should always have a jingle. And I also have a recommendation, and that is but I'm looking at it on my phone now. It's the EU Bubble Insider. I discovered it only recently, but it turns out there's a newsletter, there's a podcast, and the podcast already interviewed Maria Linkova-Nice, which we also had on our podcast. Also, Margarita Movarelli from the Martin Center. I love her. She had a very interesting episode. And also Chris Ruff from Digital Europe. So a lot of interesting people who we know because they are clients of ours or previous clients. And I think it's definitely worth a listen or to read of all those interesting newsletters. So read it and let us know what you think. Good job, guys, on the EU Bubble Insider.
Fantastic. And my recommendation is in a completely different space. It's actually a podcast I was listening to in the car. It's called Empire, and it's by William Dalrymple and Anita Anand. And it's all about, actually, this is about the British Empire, but it's a series on empire in general. So it's not just going to be the British Empire. And they really go into some of the stories of what really happened and some of the myths that, a lot of the British cultural kind of paradigm they've been educated to believe in a lot of kind of positive things about the empire that overlook the more complex and say disturbing parts of the history, and I think they uncover those. I think it's very well done, and William Dalrymple is a writer on the topic who lives in India, is British but has some fantastic insights on that. So if you're interested in it, it's incredible. It's a brilliant discussion, and it actually goes all the way to contemporary politics because it explains some of the attitudes behind Brexit, behind the kind of, I would say, misconstrued notions of British power and projection in the world. But anyway, that was quite fascinating. So we had quite a few hours because we had a long drive to the UK and back. That was over the weekend. So for a long car drive, always take a series of podcasts. That's always a fantastic thing. So that is all we have time for today. Claire, thank you so much for sharing your insights. We will, of course, be continuing this conversation on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and online in general, maybe on Mastodon for those of you who are there. Have a fantastic warm weekend because the temperature is going up to 30 degrees. So go to those swimming pools or those lakes or wherever you can go swimming and enjoy this fantastic time. Have a great weekend. See you next week.
Thank you.